Welcome to this week's edition of the Turning Points podcast. Today we had the honor and privilege of speaking to a very lovely lady, Donna Miesbach, whom you've met 25 years ago, she said?
I met her 25 years ago at the Chopra Center, and Donna is also a primordial sound meditation teacher and a yoga teacher. She's been teaching for 23 years. She is wise. She wrote a book years ago after losing her husband of 21 years. She wrote a beautiful book called My Grief, From Grief to Joy, A Journey Back to Life and Living. And she won a Silver Nautilus Award for it. So Donna is just a bundle of wisdom, love, and presence.
Yeah, it was very good. I felt like I was hugged by every word she said.
Have a listen in and enjoy our conversation.
Yes.
Hello, Donna. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here. It's been a long time since I've seen you.
I know. And remind everybody, because I thought before we got on, you're like the first time I met you, which I can't believe you remember the first time, but I guess it's because I was singing.
Yes, right. Yeah, I was at Seduction of the Spirit with Deepak in Beaver Creek, Colorado. And it was July 1996, 25 years ago this month.
Wow, that is amazing. I love that. It's been so much fun to have all the Chopra people on. We've got to have about 10 people. We interviewed you. I don't know if you know Brent Beckfar.
Oh my goodness, yes, yeah.
We interviewed him a few weeks ago, and then I did a Vedic astrology with him last week. I had never done one with him.
Oh yeah, I did one with him, and then he did a follow-up for me too. Really helpful.
Yeah, helpful for sure.
And it ties in really well with the Jyotish scrolls that I did when I was over in India with Roger.
Okay, well, we're going to have to get into that too, the Jyotish scrolls. Because we touched on that a little bit with Brent. And of course, I did mine too. So I want to hear about your experience. But let's start with our first question, which is, many seekers can recall that point in time when their childhood beliefs no longer work for them. So do you remember when you first became a seeker?
Well, this is going to sound kind of odd, but when I was about 3 or 4 years old, we spent a lot of time at church, and I understood what they were saying, but there was this thought kept going through my head that they don't get it. Where they would repeat the scripture or what Jesus had said, but then they would turn it around and as though he didn't really mean it, and all my growing years, I was searching for a deeper understanding of what was in the Bible. And it was when I was 17 that I was introduced to Unity Church and all of their teachings. And they offer a metaphysical interpretation of the scriptures. And I was just so excited because it went much further than it was like going from a small window to a bigger window. And I learned so much from that. And the affirmations that they gave me carried me through many, many years. It was a welcome change in perspective. But this went on until actually my husband's sudden passing in 1994. And that was 27 years ago. Let me see. Yeah, 27 years ago. Anyway, you talk about turning points. That was my second really big turning point, because up until then, I was just, you might say, at the mercy of my life experiences, not understanding what was causing things to happen in my life, and the mind-body connection, and how what you're thinking and feeling manifests in your experience in different ways. And so I hadn't caught on to that. But after Neil died, he had been my life, helping him survive heart problems for over 20 years. That was just my focus. And when he was gone, I just had to say, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do now? Where do I go from here? Because I did not have a clue. Half of myself was gone, it felt like, and I just had no purpose now. And I kept asking that question. And in January, 6 months later, my good friend called me and said, quick, turn on your TV because there's someone that you ought to know about. And it was Deepak. Yeah. And a couple of weeks later, she did the same thing and he was talking again. That time he was talking about um, his new book, Ageless Body, Timeless Mind.
Okay.
Yeah. So the next morning I was at the bookstore at 9 a.m. and got me a copy. And it was just pure logic to me. It was, you spoke the language of spirituality that I'd always wanted to speak. So I read the book and had a couple of questions. So I called my friend and told her about it. And she didn't know the answer to my questions, but then she started asking me questions that I didn't have the answer for. So I gave her an 800 number that she could call. And she did. And 15 minutes later, she called me back and said, well, you'll never guess what I did. And of course, what she did was sign us up. So we went together then to that course in 96 in July. And it just turned my life around. It was what I've been searching for really all my life, to have this broader perspective. And he talked about the ancient scriptures, and I was fascinated. And just so many things that opened up. I started reading or studying Aurobindo, and I actually got to be at his ashram when I traveled with Roger and Nisargadatta Maharaj, and I was at the ashram for Sri Ramana Maharshi, and this broader perspective just changed everything. And so 2 years later, it made such a difference in my life that I committed to being certified to teach meditation. And then soon after that, you opened up the yoga program, and I did that too. So it just changed everything. And it really was the beginning of a totally different chapter in my life. It's some things you can't put into words. And I think that's one of them, how much difference it made.
You have a question, Sean? Yeah.
I just wanted to, I liked that you said I was at the mercy of my life experiences prior to that moment. I think that's kind of one of the mechanisms we're exploring is that shift from, like you said, being at the mercy of your life experiences and then consciously, and then moving through life consciously, asking questions,
living your life. Yeah.
Interacting with awareness, in a different way.
Yeah, up until then, you're kind of on automatic, and I was. And lots of things that I began to realize how I just wasn't aware of how I was shaping my life. But it makes all the difference.
But there was a questioner. It sounds like you, for much of your life, lived as a questioner, as somebody who was aware that there was something beyond.
There was, yeah. I was always seeking. And I went to workshops and I read books and I listened to speakers, but it was not deep enough. It was all surface to me. I wanted to go deeper, and Deepak opened that door, and it began opening when I studied with Deepak, and from there it just grew. I studied with Jonathan Goldman and then with Dr. David Morehouse when Deepak brought him to one of our courses. I don't know if you were there for that or not, Corinne, but
oh yes,
yeah, were you? Well, I did all 5 levels with him, and at the 5th level, one of the things that we were to do was to see if there was something that was waiting for us to do. And so I just said, well, of course, in the meantime, I didn't mention this, but after Neil died, I lost both mother and daddy too. So within a period of under 7 years, I had lost all 3 of them. And what was going on? Well, life was preparing me for a new walk, you might say. A deeper approach to life and all its circumstances. And So when I mentioned that to David Morehouse, he said, well, if you write the book, I will write the foreword. And I felt so honored. So he did. I wrote the book, and it got the Silver Nautilus Award, which amazed me. But and Deepak also endorsed the book, so his endorsement's on the cover, and it was just like magic the way it all came together. But it was supposed to be.
And remind us the title of the book again.
From Grief to Joy, A Journey Back to Life and Living. I pretty much wrote my way through all of those experiences. It was my way of processing it, trying to make sense out of it. And by the time that I got to David Morehouse, I had a stack of papers like so. And I got to looking at it, and I thought, I wonder if there's a book there. And there was. So that's how that came about.
And then I also want you to delve in, because David Morehouse is a fascinating man that most people won't know who he is, but he was with the CIA, and he did remote viewing with the CIA.
Right. And what I studied with him was the remote viewing.
Yeah. So level 5 is you being able to travel to Russia just by sitting on your meditation cushion, right?
I haven't volunteered, however, but it was very interesting, and it's a special skill, and he's excellent at teaching it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I want to back up a little bit, because I really had a question even back when you were 3, 4 years old. It's so amazing that so many seekers seem to have that doorway when they're really young, and then it transforms into becoming a seeker. So how were your parents? Like, were your parents religious? Was it a problem that you weren't really into the way that the traditional church?
We didn't talk about it.
Okay.
They were beautiful people, and very sincere in their faith. And we spent a lot of time at church. And even though I didn't agree with everything, I received a wonderful foundation through all the marvelous hymns and the fellowship of Christian people, people who were trying to do the right thing. And of course, the study of the scriptures, lots and lots of good memories there. I just felt like there was more. It was a good start, but there was more.
Yeah. And then you found Unity Church, which of course is, the New Thought churches. Those are the churches that I used to sing at, the Unity Church, the Church of Religious Science.
I did not know that. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to tour all of those churches, and I would sing a couple of songs, how they have it before and after the sermon.
Yeah.
And we actually had the youngest minister, who I met when she was 16. She's now 37. She's the youngest minister in the New Thought Church community. And I don't think it's Unity. I think it's the other one, the Center for Spiritual Living. She's the youngest minister. Yeah. And we had her on a few months ago. So it's a great, those New Thought churches really help find community for those people that the traditional church does not quite work for.
Right.
Yeah. And
Good.
so how long were you married for?
We were married for 21 years. It was my second marriage. The first one did not work out. And I just figured I would never marry again. I didn't really want to after the bad experience, but it just was supposed to be, I guess.
You met Neil. And so how do you think this inner journey, I mean, obviously it's affected your life in so many ways. And where are you at now with your inner journey? Like, has it grown and changed and evolved?
Gosh, yeah.
Deeper?
Oh, yeah. Those were just the early turning points. I came across the Urantia book, which is, are you familiar with the Urantia book? Yeah, okay. And that opened up some windows for me. And then I came across Dr. David Hawkins, and that's where the non-dual perspective came in, and pieces started falling in place. And I am studying his work, and have studied it quite a bit. And I'm going to say the last 10 years. Yeah, it just makes such sense. And it's so beautiful because it encompasses everything, but it puts it at whatever level of spiritual growth you're at. It answers why things are the way they are, and how things come about at that level, and the choices that are given to us. It's like being in grade school. You don't get subtraction until you've learned to add, you see. And life is like that. It gives us, you might say, graded lessons. And when you learn to be kind to others, then maybe you can learn compassion. And so we grow inwardly as we develop these skills. And I really like his chart on the scale of consciousness that helps. And what that does is when you see people acting in a really negative, destructive, angry way, you realize that this is where they are. And instead of feeling critical, you can really feel compassion for them, and even pray for them, hope that their burden will be lightened and they'll begin to understand that there's a better way to live their lives. They don't realize what they're doing to the others, they're doing to themselves. So it's just changed my perspective in so many ways.
That's a great way to, I think, kind of unfold the concept of non-dualism, because it's interesting. I wasn't studied in a lot of spiritual philosophies, really, most of my seeking career.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole concept really just came to my presence in the last, I don't know, 3 months. We started talking about it, Corinne. And what's funny is that without a foundation of self-reflection, a foundation of mindfulness practices,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I would have understood. We've been listening to a lot of Rupert Spira recently, and his language is just so clear, concise, and precise in everything he says regarding life and spirituality. And yet, when you try to say it, when you try to repeat the words
Mm-hmm.
coming out of my mouth, it doesn't sound quite as clear.
Right.
And yet I understand it. There is
Right.
an understanding, and there's a depth to the knowing of it. And it's funny, while you were describing that, because you kind of paired somewhat of the non-dual teaching with Christ's teaching, and it's almost as if he studied non-dualism, 2,000 years ago, before he, really went on his, spiritual teaching
Mm-hmm.
practice.
I think he came in with that knowledge.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Unless he was in India until he was 33, that's a possibility.
Well, that is a possibility too. Yeah, I have books that talk about that. Well, I came across recently in Dr. David Hawkins' work where he was talking about how the three major faiths, well, I guess there's more than three, but the three that he talked about would be the Hindu faith and the Christian faith and Buddhism, and how they are a way for us to grasp what can't be explained.
Hmm.
Because you're talking about the ultimate reality and how that ultimate reality manifests itself physically, I guess you could say, through matter, and there is intelligence in it, and it becomes conscious and awareness, and becomes a presence in whatever it is in. Which then, so he relates that to how you have the Father, which would be the ultimate reality, and the Son, which is the manifestation that comes to raise the level of consciousness of what's been created. And then you have the Holy Spirit, which is the presence and dwelling of that same wisdom that's drawing us to itself. And that's true of each of those levels, where it's Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, or Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And I really liked that, because so many times, at least in the Christian faith, I don't know about the others so much, but in the Christian faith, people get really hung up on it's this way and it's not any other way. But that's so limiting. You can't put God in a box and limit him, say it can't be any other way. It's back to that matter of on whatever level you're at on that scale of consciousness, this is what's going to be true for you. But even that will change as you.
That's some truth right there, Donna.
Well, and I
Say that's a good lesson in humility for me, because what I just thought, well, it's this way. Well, it is right now, but that's not the whole story.
well, and it's interesting. I do have a Christian background, and there is, and I have gotten hung up, even in my seeking outside of my raised, faith. I find myself caught up in the language as well, but kind of on the opposite side, more of a rejection of the language. And the way you put that is a great way to dissect that interaction between the unexplainable,
Mhm.
the truth, the reality that you have
Mhm.
yourself,
Which is
that's,
real for you.
yeah,
Yeah.
your local
Right.
truth, and then
Mhm.
the Holy Spirit being. Um, can you expand on that exact? Because you said that it's a like the energy that draws you back to
To itself.
to
Yeah.
itself.
Right. So well, the ocean wave is something we use a lot in our teaching, with that ultimate reality being here, and then it starts to manifest, you see, which is forming the wave, and then the peak is where that tip of awareness is.
Hmm.
But within all of that is that inner core, which is eternal and unbounded and can't really be defined or described. But that's the reality, and that's where we come from, and that's what's drawing us back to itself in our awareness, so that we realize there's really only one of us here. It's one being, manifesting in infinite number of ways, and it's a process of love that is sending love and drawing us back. That love is the magnet that's wanting us to know more about it, to want to understand. And the beautiful thing about this, for me anyway, is that it's really helped me come back full circle, because now, for instance, when I think about Jesus, I realize I'm thinking about God, but God manifested in this form to teach us. And whatever religion you're in, I'm sure there are teachers that you can say the same thing about, that God is working through them too, because God moves through all of us.
Rupert Spira recently, what's that?
I said he moves through you.
Moved through all of us. I like the Ram Dass, the story Ram Dass talks about going to see his brother he's in an institution, he's not mentally stable. And so his brother says, how come I say I'm God and people, they put me away and lock up the key, and you say you're God and you get to write books and be a speaker? And Ram Dass said, well, that's because you say you're God and I say you're God, or I'm God and so are you.
Yes, yes,
Right?
yes. Big difference.
Yeah. And then Rupert Spira recently, as Sean said, we've been really listening to a lot. And I want to hear more about David Hawkins, because I actually just recently became aware of him a few months ago. So I'm not really familiar. So I'd like to hear
Oh my
more.
goodness. Oh
But
yeah, it opened. Yeah, do.
yeah.
I read them over and over. It's just wonderful.
So Rupert Spira said, the awareness in you is infinite, looking through your eyes, and there can only be one infinity.
That's right.
And so that's the new like language that really is like, that's pretty succinct.
There's only one awareness.
Yeah.
There's a consciousness which becomes aware within the creation. And it's graded, because not everyone who is alert and intelligent is aware. There's a difference. You have to go beyond the mind to connect.
Well, there's awareness there. They're just not aware of it.
Not spiritual awareness.
Not
Right?
consciously
They're
aware.
not awake yet.
Yeah. Yeah. So the way I got introduced to David Hawkins a couple of months ago in regards to kinesiology, muscle testing, frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to research him. and I listened to a few things and
Mhm.
I liked it. I wasn't like really drawn to it, but I resonated with it, agreed with all of it. But, just kind of, how we have different teachers at different times. And so tell
Mhm.
us more about him because I'd like to know more what drew you to him and what you're enjoying about that teaching.
I can't remember who first told me about him, but a speaker, and I don't know if it was Deepak or Dr. Morehouse or where that came from. But anyway, it triggered my interest, and so I got his book, Power versus Force.
Yeah.
I think that's the name of it, and his first one. But then having read that, I felt like this is like when I first started studying with Deepak. I went to Seduction of the Spirit and they were going to do mind body medicine next, and I had to do that. And then they were going to do creating health next. Well, I had to do that. If anybody needed that, I did. And finally, I just gave myself permission and went to everything he offered, which was wonderful. Well, it was the same thing with Dr. Hawkins. I read that first book and I saw what the second one was about. Well, I had to read that. So I have all 7 of them, and they're just almost, you could say, a foundation. I'm building a foundation of comprehension on these principles that you can't explain, but you can understand some of it. Yeah, it's wonderful. And
Yeah.
that his scale of consciousness is in there, and that's what makes it so helpful, because we realize that, like Deepak says, everyone's doing the best they can at any given moment. And I've often wondered, well, how can that be? Well, this tells you how, because these are the choices that they are being given at this level, and and then what they do with them is up to them.
So I briefly read about that or listened to one of his lectures. So thank you for explaining that. So Sean, did you get that what she was saying? He has a scale that he's no longer living, right?
Yes, recently passed.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And so he had a scale that he created of frequencies of a level of consciousness where people are at,
Mm.
what awareness they're that, and he also then has the frequencies for I don't know, all illnesses and food and everything, right?
Right, right. Yeah, they did a really extensive research on this. But well, what's something you said? I can't think now what I was going to say. Um, oh, there's a dividing line. He takes the scale, goes from 0 up to 1,000, and 1,000 would be the maximum vibration that a human being can tolerate. And it's like putting your finger in the socket, an electric socket. It's too much power for you. So when you get to there, by that time, you really don't need to be here anymore. And most people aren't when they reach that. But 200 is the dividing line. And until I think it's like 1985 or just before the turn of the century, um, the conscious level was below 200. And that's where all the really bad negative thoughts, feelings, emotions are. And it's very destructive and very dangerous. Not a good place to be in. But when you pass that 200, that's the beginning of integrity, where you're not just thinking about yourself. You're not just thinking about survival. You're starting to consider others. You're starting to control your thoughts and your emotions. And that's a graded scale of growth that increases as you work through those lessons. And it just explains so much to me.
That's a great way to explain it, and I remember being intrigued by that.
Mhm.
And for me, I don't really need that explanation. I guess that's why I wasn't drawn to his work because I'm very comfortable. Like I heard what it's the same. You know how everybody's saying the same thing, just different words we're drawn
Mhm.
to. And so I remember Eckhart Tolle said one time years ago. He said, they've got the egos like the pain body. So when you have Thanksgiving, it's like a bunch of pain bodies, all the coming out. They're like little creatures that come out to have Christmas or Thanksgiving together. Families get together and there's fighting and stuff. That's when the pain bodies come out. The reactivity comes out. And what Eckhart Tolle described, he said it's like some people literally, they're living in the amygdala, their fear response, and they literally can't hear what you have to say or reason. They just literally, it's like when Deepak talked about looking out, that Indians looking out at the ocean and not being able to see the ships. They'd never seen anything like a ship before.
Right.
And so the medicine man kept seeing the ripples in the water, and all of a sudden he kept going out every day looking at the ripples in the water, and then all of a sudden the ship would appear, and then as soon as he could see it, he pointed, and other people, and soon critical mass could see it.
Right.
And so that, to me, that's always sort of the explanation that has worked for me. And so I'm fine with the different, I feel like there's thousands of years of evolution going on the planet. At any given time, you can.
You're right. Everything is here on this planet. And Deepak, excuse me for interrupting.
No, it's good.
Before I forget, I wanted to say that he said that this is a tremendous school to be in, because you have everything here and every opportunity to learn whatever you need to learn.
And you can't rush evolution.
No, you can't.
You know, I learned that by writing my book. It's like I see now clearly that all the turning points have gotten to me, like life has been bending me and cracking me and pushing me and pressing me at just the amount of perfect way for the openings when they needed to happen.
Right.
And so I've come to a place as a teacher, it's like, nobody needs me. You know, it's like everybody's life is their own lesson. I'm here if people want to hear. You know, Sean and I do the podcast, and yes, I am still teaching, but there's been a layer of that ego, that identification as even a teacher, that's peeling away the last couple of years.
Well, more than that, as your level of understanding has grown and increased, so has the vibration that you're radiating out changed. And just being here is making a difference for everyone. That it's just like a candle that's been lit in a dark stadium. Everyone sees the light, and we don't do it ourselves. It comes through us. And so the light that you send out, even unconsciously, makes a difference. You don't have to say anything. What you are matters.
Yeah, and it's funny because over the last six to 9 months, you know, Corinne and I, we've been doing these podcasts more, and it seems like there's this, I don't want to say expedited, but there's a deepening and deepening of self-awareness, which then, as you project, you know, your view on to your surroundings, you have, at least I feel this overwhelming sense of responsibility to just be there when there's a hand that's reaching out for, you know, for help. Most of the time it just seems, especially with, you know, everything that went on last year, it's just like corroborating somebody's feeling that it's okay that you feel crazy while you're losing your mind. it feels crazy, you know, and just, I think giving the space, people need that space to feel crazy for a second in their own little world, and feel like things are just bubbling over, and just being that calm presence to say, oh, you just got to simmer it down, keeps, you know, reflecting, keep being mindful of those things. And that's where it's a shift from I need to teach people to I need to be there for people. You know, that's
no, you just need to be
exactly right.
yourself.
Yes, just be.
Yeah. And what you are will say more than anything that you could ever tell them.
Right.
Yeah. I like what you said about the chaos. It reminded me of Deepak's statement. It takes chaos to give birth to a dancing star.
Yes.
So when anyone is in a really chaotic situation and are telling me about it and asking about it, I just say you have to remember that if things are going to change, then things have to change, you know, and we just have to recognize that there's a power that's at work in your life, and it's shifting things around. And our part is to expect the best possible solution. because that's what the universe is doing, is always working for our highest possible good.
So that's beautiful. You know that. I know that. Sean knows that. But what about the people that fight the discomfort of when the chaos before the dancing star is burst and born, and they're in the middle of the chaos? They're because I do life coaching, and my life coaching is sort of it's transitioning now, and I'm so happy it is, because for many years it's been like trying to pull the Titanic with
Yes, yes,
because when you're dealing at the level of the mind, there's just really no solutions because the mind is so fickle and
yes.
it'll change all the time. But now, coming from this non-dual perspective, there's no more Titanic anymore. It's just, it's just shining my light. And yet there are still some of my clients that have been with me for a long time that aren't quite into the non-dual stuff yet, and they really
But they don't have
struggle.
to be, Corinne. They don't have to be. And I don't know, excuse me for
No,
interrupting.
it's okay.
Do they believe in God? Do they believe in a
Oh
higher
yeah.
power?
Mhm.
All right. But God loves them unconditionally. And we don't always even understand what that means to be loved unconditionally, but it's total acceptance no matter what's going on. And God is always at work in their life to bring out the best possible outcome. And if they can if they can accept that, or even work with that concept.
They can't.
All right, so
They
because we
can't.
have thoughts that we're stuck in, we have mindsets and perspectives that we're stuck in, and we think this is it, but this isn't always it.
Yeah.
And so they need to, if they can, try to let go of those limiting thoughts and look more toward the light than the dark.
Yeah, I mean that's what I've been preaching. That's what I've been saying. It's so funny because some of my clients, they get so stuck, which it's totally fine. I'm there. It's helped me to come up with 100 different ways to say the same
Yes,
thing.
right.
And what I've realized is that they're stuck until they're not stuck. Like, our suffering is what is going to crack us open, and only the universe knows the divine timing of when
Right.
that crack is going to be. And obviously their suffering isn't enough yet to crack.
Mhm.
I've seen in my life the different suffering along the way, and when you in hindsight, you're like, oh, why did I have to go through that? But yet you realize you had to go through it because you did go through it.
Oh, that is so true. And that's exactly where I was at, after losing Neil. It was absolutely devastating. I just was totally traumatized by that. And how could anything good possibly come from this? But I eventually, over time, found out that there was such a gift. Everything comes bearing a gift. And I kept wondering what possible gift could come from this. And when I was studying with Deepak, that very first time, it hit me. We'd stopped for lunch, and Deepak had said, now there may be some people, we're going to have a silent lunch. There may be some people who will cry, but he said, just allow them to cry. And I thought, well, why would anybody cry? We're so glad to be here. But I had taken about 2 bites, and all of a sudden it hit me. This is the gift that all things bring. And I
Mm,
just lost it right there at the table.
mm.
It was so powerful. And that carried with me through all these courses. I realized this was part of the plan. And when Deepak died, he left me with a sense that there are things we still need to do together, but this is the only way we can do them. And I began to understand as I was doing that, even in La Jolla, when the office was down in La Jolla, I would go walking on the beach and I could just feel this is how it was going to be. But I didn't recognize it at the time. And it was huge. But the harder the challenge, the more difficult it is, the greater the gift it brings.
Yes. Yes, so true. The harder the challenge,
The
the more
greater the gift.
beautiful, the greater the gift.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something you can tell your clients. I know this is really difficult, but there is a gift hidden in it. And
Oh,
someday,
I do. I do. But there's sometimes you can't tell people that when they're in the middle of it. I've learned that. I've learned that to be what I've learned, because I've been doing this for a long time now. What I've learned is just to hold space with them with compassion.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And really, because sometimes people do need to just sit in their pain. I mean, there are some times where I tell them to put their big girl panties on, and
Mhm.
and your mind is spinning, and there are,
You're right. Sometimes just having someone who will listen,
yeah,
very, very helpful,
yeah.
whether they ever say a word or not.
Yeah. And you know what, I wanted to mention, just because we've been so blessed and to have so many of the Chopra people on our podcast over the last 6 months. And, you know, it was for me too, like when Deepak was on TV in the mid 90s, he was
Mhm.
on Oprah, he was on PBS. And I feel like there's so many of us that were activated hearing him speak, because I
Mhm.
remember the
Yeah.
first time I heard him speak, my jaw dropped, and you do too.
Mhm.
My
Mhm.
jaw dropped. I was in the middle of ironing clothes. I can still remember it was yesterday. And I was like, this is what I've been waiting for my entire life. Now,
Those were my words. That's what I've been looking for all these years. Yeah.
yeah,
Somebody who spoke the language of spirituality.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and then you'll have to. We interviewed Ariel Ford, who of course was Deepak's publicist and really was there before he was famous, and
Okay.
was there to help make him famous. And she also was the publicist for Wayne Dyer,
Mhm.
for Dean Ornish, she's Debbie Ford's older sister, and so there was that whole movement in the early '90s that she was actually the mother of. She,
Mhm.
Marianne Williamson, all those people, she was their
Mhm.
publicist. So I'll send you that link to her interview, because it's really interesting to hear.
Mhm.
This is such a synchronistic point in time. And she's like, Deepak would have been Deepak without me, but I got to be there,
Yes.
she said.
Yes. Well, all of these voices were surfacing at about the same time. It's just like it was supposed to be that way.
Yeah. Just
Mhm.
like the 60s were this revolution after the Vietnam War and all the hippie movement,
Mhm.
which Sean considers himself a hippie. I definitely consider myself a hippie. And a friend of ours, Jamie, just got this little dog, the singer Jamie, and they named it Hippie. So she wanted to research the name, and hippie means seeker. It comes from a word that means seeker.
Oh, wow. Mhm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's funny.
pretty wild. Huh? You've been been calling yourself a seeker as long as I've known you.
Yes. Well, I've been a hippie for a while.
And hippie, I mean hippie. Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, so can you tell me, also back to David Hawking, because I know you're really, really immersed in him right now. So want to hear more about that. What would be any more benefits from, and what have you found out where your consciousness is, like, of the measuring of where consciousness is?
I haven't done that on purpose.
Okay.
I feel like that would be an ego thing.
Yes, that's why I was wondering, because
Yeah.
I've heard of him. I listened to a lot of podcasts doing research for our podcast, and that's how I came across David Hawking. And there's people that have been sort of following in his footsteps and doing the frequencies. I think there's
Mhm.
a guy up in Canada doing it actually. And I was like, yeah, what's the use of all this? But I like the way you described it, that it's a way of understanding the levels of consciousness that are here on the planet.
Right. So we can be more compassionate toward
Passionate.
each other.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I've thought about testing different things like that, but I finally decided it's really none of my business.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because, well, like I said, you can't rush evolution. It's like you are where you are,
Yeah.
and
And if you find out, you think, oh, well, that's better than I thought, or
right,
whoa,
or it's
further than that. And that's all ego, you know.
all
I'm trying to
ego. Above and beneath,
yeah, get rid of that. So
above and beneath no one, as dear Roger and Deepak say.
what did you say?
Above and beneath no one.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and I'm curious about. I'm definitely going to look into that because I'm curious about the. As soon as you bring that into a subjective world, I can see that a scale of awareness or a scale of consciousness being manipulated very, very easily. Well, kind of like any spirituality, really. I mean, you look through the ages, and I can see where I think that's wise of you not to, self-test on where you
Right,
might do that.
right. But you can't manipulate it because the intention that first of all, you have to be honest. You have to be a person of integrity,
Right.
and attention has to be in integrity, or you won't get a true reading.
Right. I just mean I could see where a teacher of that method could be very
Oh,
manipulative if you land below the teacher,
right,
so to
right,
speak, it
right.
can become,
Yeah.
a control mechanism, which
Mhm.
which isn't. I'm sure it's not its purpose. I'm sure its purpose is to understand the level of consciousness, and
Right.
also I'm sure it's something to do with understanding that you have existed or do exist at
Mhm.
all levels simultaneously to some degree or another.
Right. Well, you move back and forth,
Right.
you hit a rough spot and you maybe go down a few, but the working of it maybe ends up a little bit higher. But that doesn't matter. The important thing is the effort and the intention.
Yes.
And Corinne was asking about the books. One of his books, Transcending the Levels of Consciousness, and he talks about this in all of his books, coming from a different focus each time. But that particular book helps you understand. It takes you in the upper levels, and he describes what it's like, what a person at that level, what their personality is like, the characteristics that are established within them, the way they live their lives, all of that. It walks you through that so that you can study that level. If that's the level that you want, that you aspire toward, you can be studying that and then check back and see. In fact, I made a list on the one that I was particularly moved by, and the things that were the qualities that were in that level. And then I would just, oh yeah, I need to be doing more of this, you see, in my life. And so I would work on that. And it's just, it gives you kind of a guide as to how you can most effectively improve
Mhm.
in your evolution.
That's nice. I like that. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
I like, you know, it's so interesting to me how all of these teachings weave into each other in parallel. You can see the parallels, because for me, I've studied yoga for a very long time and sort of
Mhm.
been drawn down that path, the yoga philosophy. And, in yoga, we've got the 8 limbs of yoga.
Mhm.
And in the 8 limbs, there's, right action, right speech,
Mhm.
non-harming, all these
Mhm.
different things, which
Mhm.
are really what you're talking about. And it's the same in Buddhism, has all these
Mhm.
qualities as well. And what
Mhm.
I found is, when I first studied yoga back in La Jolla in 1995 or 96 with Rama Birch, um, I learned about the 8 limbs of yoga for the very first time.
Mhm.
It was like mind blowing for me. It's like, wow,
Mhm.
this right, right way to live. This looks amazing. And
And
then
you
I kind of forgot.
paradigm, didn't it?
What's
It
that?
was a new paradigm.
Yeah, it was a totally new paradigm that made sense in my being to look at.
Mhm.
Then I kind of forgot about it a little because I was really into meditation, and then I was about, the teaching the yoga. And then years later, like maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I was assisting one of my yoga teacher, another yoga teacher, in a training, and he was once again going over the 8 limbs, kind of like how I hadn't heard it for
Mhm.
25 years. And I was like, oh my gosh, all of these things have happened in my life automatically by meditating and doing yoga and living an aware life.
Mhm.
Automatically, these qualities have shown up.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was really quite blown away by that. So
Well, you're
you can,
changing frequencies, and that's what that has done. And as we continue to purify our intentions and our desires, our frequency changes, and it draws to us things that are available at that finer frequency.
it's beautiful, being a musician. I, I, I feel like, I don't know why, or maybe it's the understanding where I'm at now, but I have been thinking for the last 2 years in frequency. I feel and think in frequency. Like everything makes sense to me in a description of frequency. That's just like the language that comes to me, whether I'm talking about somebody else or doing anything. It's just like, oh,
Mhm.
that frequency, it's like a vibe. It's like the vibe, the frequency. I can feel it viscerally.
Yeah, those are levels of energy. Those
Yeah.
frequencies are levels of energy, which is the same thing as Dr. Hawkins is talking about, just different terminology.
Right, right. That's what I love about all these different, and that's
Mm.
what we're noticing in the Turning Points podcast too, is different people from different backgrounds have different language, and then seeing the similarities of
Mhm.
all of it. We're really all much more similar than we are different.
Right. And we're all saying the same thing in different ways.
Or failing at saying the same thing in different ways, because that's where I am. Well, and that's what's it's speaking, kind of getting back to the compassion word, which I think you brought up a couple times earlier on in the conversation. You, I feel like early on in the seeking process, we run into other people who are seekers, and we share these conversations, share these stories, and our very base knowledge of the new thing we're learning, and there is somewhat of a sense of, well, I feel, or I might seem a little bit higher than them. They're not getting it yet. You kind of have that ego mechanism still very active in the early stages, and it's what this podcast has shown me is having conversations with so many different people from different backgrounds, different upbringings, at different stages in their life, and
Mhm.
it can be two completely opposing faith backgrounds or two completely different spiritual backgrounds, but how they're talking about their story or how they're expressing their relationship to spirit, to the spiritual journey,
Mhm.
it feels right. It doesn't matter the specifics. It feels very right, and you can kind of, like what you mentioned, is the intention behind your actions is the most important, not where you land currently. It's
Mhm.
how you're interacting with where you land currently.
Yes. Oh, beautifully said. Yeah.
So that's been a gift of being able to feel that.
Mhm.
I'm 30. I'm going to be 35, and I've been speaking to people who've been meditating for 30 years, who have such a vast experience, yourself included, and there's a very easy mechanism to fall into a, there's no way I'm anywhere near that person, right? That's the
Oh.
ego mechanism, right? But that's just ego mechanism, because when you share in that space, and the commonality of, well, my intention is to be as true and natural as possible, as that God figure, that father figure,
Mhm.
moves through me
Mhm.
and enacts my experience. And that's as close as you can get to to interacting in this physical world, from my understanding currently.
Well, also, when you were talking with these people who've been doing this so much longer than you have to remember that they're just being your mirror,
Yes.
because whatever you see in them is already in you.
Yeah. I know. That's also been an extremely weird situation at times, as some interviews just are a much more polished mirror. So it gets weird real quick when you see that happen. So yes, you're right.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
Uh, they don't see how that could be. They feel like they're not that far along. Well, it's a lot like Deepak's illustration. Now, you don't criticize a rose bush because it hasn't bloomed yet.
Yeah.
The blossom is coming,
Yeah.
just isn't the right time yet.
Yeah.
No,
Oh, that's a beautiful note to end on. That's lovely, Donna. Thank you.
you, yeah.
It's been a great conversation. Great to reconnect with you after so many years. Great to see where you're at and hear your wisdom. You have
Our
such
shared wisdom.
shared wisdom,
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah. I've just so enjoyed this, and thank you so much. I feel so honored to be a part of it, and to meet you, Sean. And it's been a special joy for me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to meet you. I don't usually do too much investigation. I get the gist of what we're getting into the day of, or sometimes very shortly before, and so I don't
Mhm.
have any expectations usually going into these conversation. And I really appreciate your perspective and your experience and your wisdom that you've shared today. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, and bless you both for what you're doing. I look forward to hearing more about it.
Thank you.
And we're in the same or section with Donna Miesbach. Man, she is a sweetie pie. She is like the universal grandmother archetype who just wants nothing but good things for you and love. She's awesome, man.
You just described her.
Yes.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Universal grandmother. I'm going to have to tell her that.
She's just she has that presence about her. She's very light. She's very accepting, and just kind of talking with her is like a hug. And her words of wisdom were intriguing to me. For somebody who we mentioned, I don't know if we mentioned in the podcast, but she'll be 87 in a couple weeks, and pretty rare to find somebody that present and that flexible, pliable. No offense to people in their 80s. It's just, kind of part of life as we get older. It starts to go eventually. So I was really impressed with her ability to really flow through and meet new concepts, and her knowledge of the different spiritual backgrounds is pretty vast.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to her. And we hung up, and then we usually tell people when we stop the recording, don't hang up so we can say a proper goodbye. And then she was like right into this amazing
Yeah.
story that we have to share here, since we weren't recording then. But apparently she broke her back, she said 55 years ago, and it was just a really huge ordeal. um, Very painful. She struggled with it, went into depression over it. And then recently, during 2020, she actually fell and cracked her sacrum in two places and had to go to rehab. They had to cement her sacrum back together. Again, she said the pain was horrendous, but she said the contrast in the way she experienced her broken back 55 years ago and how she experienced her painful sacrum now was just the opposite end of the spectrum. Like now she just was like, okay, God, what is it for me now? Just praying and accepting, and just showed up with herself with compassion and with love. And that's what I wanted to highlight, because that's why we do these spiritual practices. One of the many reasons is so that we can show up in our life with these different experiences and just show up.
Yeah.
We tend to have such a very complicated, and I even alluded to this in the podcast about some of my clients who just don't want to, they don't see anything good with either the physical or the emotional pain that they're in. They're in it, and they get so absorbed in it that it kind of goes down a rabbit hole with a negativity, depression, like Donna said she happened to her 55 years ago. And so I tell people, yes, emotional and physical pain is challenging, but it's there.
Yeah.
So to not just look after yourself, take aspirin, go to the doctor, look after the best you can if it's physical pain. um but also not to fight it. It is what it is, and it makes it worth by saying, I just don't want to be here. I don't want to feel this way.
Yeah, and that was what she said was, her spiritual practice, the studying, the philosophies, and bringing that spiritual awareness into her life change the way she responds to circumstances of suffering and pain. And and really that it's like, oh, it just changes how you respond. Well, that's kind of it. I mean, that's what we're up against. Is we have what's happening, we have the circumstances around us, and we have how we're going to respond to that. And she started the podcast with, she was at the mercy of her circumstances or her experiences, and that is that's a very real thing. That's a real mechanism. Is we have these automatic responses or these trained responses, reactions. I kind of differentiate them. That's how my mind looks at them. Is there's a reaction which is coming from a trained experience.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that I'm going to automatically do, is react to this. Versus a response is a reaction from awareness. You're responding from a place of awareness. And in a situation of suffering and pain like that, if you respond from awareness and you take it all in and you accept that this is the reality, knowing that this is not your identity. Your identity is not the suffering. Your identity is not the pain. It it dramatically changes the process of being in suffering and pain. And I loved her. She was talking about, a wave in an ocean, which I thought was brilliant. That hit me just perfectly. She's talking about the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit or Holy Ghost. And, the Father, the ultimate reality is the ocean, and the Son is the wave, and the Holy Spirit is the gravity that keeps drawing it back to itself. And I love that because, we're these momentary waves. We keep coming up. We experience the detachment from the ocean, right? For a moment, we feel that we're not the ocean while we're being a wave, and then we crash right back into the ocean, and we, come back to the oneness of the vastness of the ocean.
And yet the wave is never, ever separate from the ocean.
Correct. That's why I did the quotes.
Yeah.
We feel the separateness from the ocean because when you're not aligned in the truth of the situation, which is the truth is you are not ever separated. You're experiencing a different aspect of being the ocean, I guess is the way to put it. As you're doing that, suffering and undue suffering comes from identifying as a wave separate from the ocean and the fear of not being that wave anymore, losing the identity of your waveness. And that's where we struggle when we become attached to being the wave, thinking we're not a part of the ocean. When you align with the true reality that's happening here is, and that's what I think, what non-dualism, if we take that metaphor, what it feels like, and I want your take on this because this is how it's hitting my brain is, non-dualism accepts the experience of being that wave while knowing you're still part of the ocean. It's being in alignment with both of those facets that are happening is, yes, you are experiencing life differently, a different aspect of the ocean, being the wave. That's okay as long as you know and understand that you are still the ocean and you are part of the ocean.
And you realize that everybody else is too.
Yes, great distinction. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like is there's an openness in that practice or in that philosophy when you're existing as the wave, when you're in the wave form and you're experiencing the other waves and you recognizing all these different waves colliding together, moving together, moving separately, opposing, being present to that reality and being in that real and seeing the differences in all these different waves is okay, so long as you know you're all going to be reabsorbed back into the ocean and the vastness. And when you are there, I'm just sitting with this mechanism right now because it's peculiar to live life that way. It feels unusual to live life that way, where you're okay, it's time to be this character. And who were we just talking to who talked about putting on the different masks? It's okay to put on the different masks. Maybe that was Rupert, talking. It's time to put on this mask, time to put on this mask, as long as you take off the mask and you don't become attached to the mask.
Wasn't it Rudrani?
Possibly. I'm not sure. But that's another great metaphor for it is it's not the action. It's not the action of putting on these different masks or recognizing the different waves or being a different wave. It's not. That's not where the conflict comes from. The conflict comes from being convinced and staying convinced that you're separate from everything else that you are playing with in this world view.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's not a conflict. It's just what causes suffering.
Yeah.
Because if you think that you are only a bundle of, a skin encapsulated ego of thoughts and emotions, and that you're not connected to anything or anyone, and your life and your happiness is basically based on the objective world, which is constantly coming and going.
Yes. Yes.
And so whether it's your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, love, love of human beings is mostly not, it has conditions.
Mm.
And so everything we experience is objective. It comes and goes constantly, except for that which is looking through our eyes.
Yes.
And so at first, when you first start, I remember Adi Shanti talking to me about this when I asked a question on one of the retreats I was on with him years ago. He said, at first it seems like you're two people, like you're aware of the awareness and you're acting in your life. But eventually, and Alea talked about this too, it does merge
Mm.
and you just feel it connection to everyone, like to not just people, but everything is
Yeah.
that same, conscious awareness. It's that same beingness. The beingness, it's just that, the computer doesn't, if the computer had an identity, the identity would be I.
Right.
But the computer, as far as we know, doesn't have an identity unless it's in a
Yeah.
Pixar cartoon, right? And so those of us which call ourselves, have an I and me, this awareness inside, that's that awareness, that's the infinite awareness that we're talking about, that beingness.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting process of, like she talked about, understanding, and then just when you think you understand, you realize you don't understand.
Well, that's the humbling back and forth, and it's, I feel like I've intellectualized what you just said. It's I don't want to say easy. I was about to say it's easy to intellectual. It's not easy to intellectualize really any of this stuff, but that seems to be it's a common theme to intellectualize this first. Intellectualize, oh, okay, yeah, that which is, viewing through my eyes, like, oh, okay, like you can kind of start to you start to structurize these concepts, and I feel like that merger is starting to happen, and what's interesting the most about it is letting go of the understanding, letting go of the fact that you understand now, letting go of the fact that I get it. As it merges, you have to let go of that understanding too, and that's a strange thing, because the whole time you're spiritually seeking, or at least this is my experience, is you're aiming for a goal, right? That's becomes part of that intellectualizing process. Is there's a goal in place. The goal is to find understanding. But once I find understanding, I'm going to be good. And then that's when the wave crashes back into the ocean. And it's startling, because you realize that you have identified with the understanding, or you've identified with the intellectualizing of a concept. And
I wouldn't say that's crashing back into the ocean. I would say that's the wave getting higher and becoming more separate. Crashing
correct.
back into the ocean is when you realize there is no you, there is no me, there's just awareness.
Yeah, and for me, the visual is the settling after the crash.
Yes.
That's the chaos. That's the feeling of separation. All of a sudden, you don't know anymore, but then it settles back into, but there is knowing, there is understanding.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
That was the visual I was kind of seeing as she was talking about it. It's, and that happens over and over again. And sometimes they're really big waves, they're really high peaks of separation, and they're massive crashes. And then sometimes the ocean is just calm, and it's serene, and it's peaceful for a while. And then I recognize within myself, when I'm in that place of serenity, or that calmness where there's not many waves going on, I find even then there's an attachment. Man, I wish this serenity would just last forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I sure do.
And that is also that ego identifying agent, that intellectualizing, thing, wanting to separate itself from the vast ocean, in a kind of a reverse psychology kind of a way. And so, yeah, it's a funny game to watch that play. but then also to be able to sit with at any time that connection and that oneness and allow that to just be as it is. Having access to that more regularly has been, it's been peculiar. It's an odd relationship. It's an odd not disconnect that you're used to having a disconnect with, and so it's fun. It's just kind of a fun game at this point, I guess. But I liked your language in describing that relationship, and I also like that. Well, sorry, I know I'm talking a lot, but I liked that. That was the first time I didn't have an adverse reaction to some of the terms she was using, because in the past, I hear Father, Son, Holy Ghost. I'm going church in the middle school when I'm having, issues and separating. But the way she used those terms from her background to describe the relationship that I recognize with or without those terms, that was the first time that happened, and that was really interesting to have that experience.
Yeah. Yeah, that it all started with her at 3 or 4 years old, hearing them talk about Jesus in church and thinking they're not getting it right. There's something missing in translation here. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. You say because it's happening for you this way, that you're understanding it maybe more intellectually first, right? And I do agree with that. It can be. I mean, Rupert Spira talks about that. I mean, especially now these days online, and living in Tiruvannamala too. It's like everybody's talking about non-dualism and Vedanta and Advaita, and there's no doer, and it does tend to get very heady when they're not present with it and being practical with it, and anybody can really talk the talk that hasn't experienced it yet.
Yeah.
But I actually had the opposite happen to me. I had the experience of it, and I had absolutely no understanding of what was happening to me.
Yeah.
I mean, no understanding. When I did that 30 days of silence, I got up from a meditation and walked over to the mirror. I felt like I was floating, and I looked in the mirror and I saw myself looking at myself. Like there was just a vast universe looking through my eyes.
Mm.
And 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 so my journey has really been integrating that the rest of my life, and understanding and integrating that into life. That's what my book is really about, is the integration of my spiritual awakening and actually living here as a human being.
And that is the play. Those are the two things that are happening at the same time. That is, when you say that, it's like, oh yeah, I get that, but I have not experienced that I have not been experiencing that for a very long time. It's been only recently that I'm inviting that the experience like you're talking about. I've been very, what's the word? I have been not letting go of, I've been not letting myself experience that. I've been reluctant to have the experience that you're describing. So it's kind of funny because, you integrate. I've been integrating it slowly, too afraid to let go and, dive into something that deep. And yet I think if we really started to describe the experiences we've had on that, it would be very, very in sync with, the terminology I think we would end up using on both sides would be pretty in sync to that, having different, convergence points with it and different experiences with it. And then again, to the point of the conversation is both ways are great. Our sincerity and intention behind both paths is the more important thing. And
and you also don't have any control over it.
That's the other part. Yes. So it sounds like, early on you let go of that control.
No, I got hit by the gray stick. The only
Okay.
Yeah, there was nothing. The only thing I did was make myself available by going to a 30-day silent retreat.
Yeah.
And that's what all the great teachers say. All you can do is make yourself available. That's what we do when we're meditating every day,
Right.
is we're making ourselves available for grace.
Yes. That's beautifully put.
I
So-
had nothing to do with it. There was no letting go. There was no not letting go. There was no
Yeah.
trying. There was no doing. There was just making myself available by signing up for a 30-day silent retreat. And then this spontaneous thing happened to me, not understanding it. Like I had no language for it. All I knew that I was blissed. Like that's all I knew, because to me, the definition of bliss, like it's kind of an overused word now. And I know Colleen doesn't like that word, but to me, when I started using it in the 90s, innocently, bliss means to be happy without any outside circumstances. It just means the inherent happiness. And Rupert Spira just talks about it as happiness. Now, a lot of spiritual people don't like talking about it as happiness, because most people refer to happiness as when you get something, a happiness that comes and goes. But I'm happy because I'm in love. I'm happy because I have money. But what he's talking about is about that inherent happiness that's already within, that's unlimited, unconditionally fulfilled. So I experienced that that within myself, that unlimited, unconditionally fulfilled aspect of myself, with no sort of, with the identification with the I sort of disappearing, but I didn't know what was happening.
Mm.
And then having that going back into my life of being like a 28-year-old, 29-year-old young singer in Nashville, and trying to like navigate, it was pretty, I mean,
Startling.
startling, and had a lot of, that's why it's making a good book.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it would, right? Because, and that's what we have to offer and share, is our experience with that experience, our perspective and the clear view you must have now on the whole unraveling of that experience. That would be your greatest gift, right? Is to be able to share that and let people understand and see through your experience and relate to it. I mean, that's all we have for each other, right? Is to be able to share that feeling, that understanding, and our experiences of love and bliss, happiness with each other.
That's why we tell our stories and we talk, because we're all human. Every single person on the planet wants to be happy. They just search in the wrong direction.
Mm.
They think that even being healthy will make them happy, and happiness is already there.
Yeah.
Whether you're healthy or not in the body, whether you're emotionally, happiness is already inherent. It just gets covered up by the emotions, the thoughts, the feelings, the activity of the mind. But it's there when you stop.
Yeah. Know it's available, and then make yourself available to receive it.
Yeah. Good talk.
Yes. Great conversation. I enjoyed it. So
Awesome.
Until next time, thank you for letting us have this playground of using words and trying to articulate that which ultimately can't be articulated.
That's what we're doing, Sean, every week.
That's what I'm doing.
All right. Love you.
Love you too. Bye.